Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to the Fintorn Bay Arts AMP Music online sessions. My name is Lewis Lowe, your host, and tonight on Creating Work and Working Creatively, I have the pleasure of introducing my good friend and collaborator, Genevieve Taylor. Jen works full-time in music PR events and is a force of positivity in the underground dance music scene. She's recently actually gone freelance full-time and is working on her own agency with her own clients. And tonight we're going to be discussing the ins and outs of music PR, managing a creative career, how to sustain it, and how to sustain your mental health throughout this journey as well. So first of all, I'd just like to welcome everyone and welcome Jen.
Hi, thank you for having me.
No problem. Good. We usually have like 5 minutes before to have a little quick chit chat, but we've been very rushed tonight. So how are you doing?
Yeah, I'm good. Rushed in general. I thought it was going to be a chill January, but it's been a very busy January. But that's okay. I think when you start out, it's better to be too busy than have nothing on.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah, definitely. It does feel a bit surreal to think that it is. Well, I guess it's February now, actually, 2nd of February. But
yeah.
oh God, yeah. But no, I'm the same. It feels like we've kind of hit the ground running after a very quiet 2 years, and everyone's playing catch up. So I've given a very, very brief intro, but I thought maybe you could go a little bit further and give us a bit more info on your background and how you came to be in the music PR business.
Yeah, so I feel like this kind of is quite a common pathway for people. I started really in events and the promotion side of things when I was at uni. Girl wanted to put on parties, started booking DJs, got into the world of electronic music, underground electronic music in like a very heavy way. And like I'd been doing a business degree and
oh cool.
That was gone. That was boring. I wanted to be creative. So I had my head down, but all the while we were doing like parties for the best of like two or so years. That was about God, when was that? 10 years ago, yeah. So wow. I went from putting on raves in locations that I wasn't meant to be putting them on in to moving to London. And I was working actually as a account executive just for a food brand. I still didn't really, because I'm from Belfast and like Belfast's very small, I didn't really know PR was a thing. I didn't know it was a job or that it existed. I just thought stuff appeared in magazines and that was how it happened. And I guess I got a taste of it from promoting events to see how they were, told and how people got to know about them and stuff like that. But like I still didn't really understand how products were placed or how things were happening and how media was generated. And so I stayed working with more on the event side. So I worked for that food company and then I worked for House of Vans. So I was doing like big branded stuff, always with a music sort of side to it. So we did a lot of like live events, a lot of big parties. And again, it was more promotes and events organization type work I was doing. From that, I realized I didn't really like working with the food side that much and wanted to dive more into the actual events. So I then started interning with a magazine, an electronic magazine. So I was doing like news assisting for them. And that's where I really was like, okay, this is what PR
this is what it takes. Yeah.
Realized I didn't really like
pull the curtain back somewhat.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, well, here we go. This is why I'm seeing so much of this one person everywhere.
Right.
So I did that and learned how to write news, learned how it all worked, learned how pitches got sent and got like a good grounding in how things come from like a journalist perspective. Realized I absolutely hate writing news. And like, I think there's something in how Northern Irish people speak and write, especially like our sentences are like backwards. I don't know, it must be a colloquial thing, but like I found it very hard at the start to understand structurally how to write things rather than just saying it as it was. So I did that for a bit and then I got an internship again with a PR agency. It was linked to the magazine I worked for, and that was where I started working on festivals. So I was helping out with press campaigns for places like Warehouse Project, we did the launch of Gotwood, the Safe Fabric campaign, the Hydra, and that was like, again, like I'd only been in London for about a year and a half, and that was a massive eye opener. I was like, I can go to all these parties, I can go to these events, like I'm gonna get to like meet everyone who's doing this stuff. I'm gonna hear loads of different music. I'm gonna meet agents, and I did. I met loads of different people, and I was working across like, you know, the most amazing and fun events and really understanding how the machine worked. And while I was doing that, I also was still working with events because I still thought, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to be events manager. This is what I want to do. So while I was interning, I was also working at different festivals on their like intern or assistant teams. So I worked at Dimensions, their media team as an intern as well. For a different company. And when I was there, I met two girls there and ended up then working for their PR agency after my internship was finished. So I stayed there. Yeah, I stayed there for 2 years. And then from there, I went from being assistant to like managing. I think I was working on like 16 festivals in 1 year. It was crazy. Going to like 14 of them. Yeah, just being in the deep end.
Yeah, I bet. Just that sounds, I mean, it sounds like a whirlwind, a complete whirlwind of, because I had a very similar introduction. I think our introductions to dance music and that kind of underground culture are very similar in that I was at university and I was that kind of guy that had a DSLR camera. So they were like, oh, come and take pictures. And I was like, I don't know how to, okay. And then would go along, take pictures, and then would go to the after party and try and play music. And that's how it started. And then just kind of very quickly ignored my degree completely and focused pretty solely on music from that point on. And I mean, as you've kind of gone through the stages of how you were introduced and led to a certain level, but PR, it's music PR, like you've just kind of mentioned so many things. It's massive. It's a massive field. And there's lots of avenues that people can work within and make a living. And I was just wondering if you could give us like music PR for dummies and why it's so important.
So music PR is really like, music PR is promoting an artist, their music, their tours, or their brand in general. It's how you generate public and media attention for them, and it's the process of taking them and their music and being strategic about how you promote them in order for them to get recognition. It's introducing them, it's telling their story, it's managing their reputation. It's making sure that you have the right team for their visuals and their aesthetics. So bringing in the right stylists, bringing in the right photographers for all their press shots. And like really the PR, as a PR, you're bypassing gatekeepers. You're using your connections to bring the artists to the attention of the right places and making sure that their profile is built in the way that's right for them, which is always going to be different depending on who the artist is, what their sound is, what their story is, what their heritage is. But my job as a PR is to bring the ideas and work with the artists so they can be like the best they can be, and also have fresh ears and be objective and see what they might not see as part of their story and focus on that.
Yeah, I guess there's definitely an element of an artist getting very much kind of stuck in a quagmire of their own creativity sometimes, and having, like you say, a fresh pair of eyes to look over it and be critical, but objectively critical of it, or critique it, should we say, and then say this, you know, in my experience, this would work for you, it may not. And it's really interesting because it's a constantly like morphing role, because like you say, each artist is completely different. Sorry, there's a fire engine going past. It's gone now. Each artist is completely different, so it must be a really interesting role because there's not a set formula. I mean, I guess there are some parameters that you can, you know, like certain ways to approach certain people, but in terms of the content that you're promoting, it's different every time. and it's a symbiotic relationship with each artist. So it's not just sending, like, the artist basically doesn't just send you a load of stuff and then you go off and do it. You're constantly in contact with them and going back and forth, and almost it's very close to management as well, I would say.
Yeah, I would say that's where the kind of what was the term I used? The kind of I guess it's kind of brand management rather than people management. And it's again reputation management and shaping and helping to build. And that's like, whenever you say shaping someone, it can sound really it's not very forced and very false, but it's not. It's about taking these artists, particularly with like a lot of electronic artists who maybe are more introverted or work in a very specific way, and they become so absorbed in their microcosm of their processes and what they are. Like, you have to pull out those influences and you have to pull out the other interests, and you have to look at other things that they might not see that might actually be a massive what's the word, like a huge perspective for press.
A great selling point sort of thing, as well. Something that translates from, like you say, it may be a potentially insular creative practice, but you're able to go in and see it and pull something out that will be really well publicly received, and it may be something completely alien to what that artist may have thought initially, and having the courage to be able to say that to someone as well, and say, and for them to take that trust in you as well.
And it's also like massively about managing expectations as well. Like, if you go to a PR and they want to sell you the world, or you're releasing your debut single and you're getting promised you're going to get covers and you're going to get, a top tier DJ mix, or you're going to get, like, I don't know, placed in all of the broadsheet podcasts, something like that. Like, that's not how it works. It's about being strategic and about building things and doing things in like a timely manner, so that the artists, as they develop, they have places to go. Like, if you're an emerging artist, you need to get the building blocks, and you need to find the fans, and you need to like tell your story in a way that's digestible and not exhausting at press for once. So if you get picked up, say you're like a really fast emerging artist, you're getting loads of noise, and there are times to like really jump on that and to do all the features you can, especially if you're, there is an element of the hype machine. But if you're an artist that wants to slowly build, and you've got like a long-term strategy, and you have a lot of projects coming up, or you're dabbling in different sounds, you have to you can't do it all at once. And I think the way the media works, artists they often don't understand how it works, and they don't understand that
Sorry, we lost you there. Just say that again, sorry.
Oh no, sorry. So then the artist sometimes sees the media, and like, obviously you have things to aspire to, but they maybe want the very top tier feature at the very start, and they don't quite understand that that takes a long time to build to. And if you do that too soon, you're actually jeopardizing like your future coverage. Like, some things you got to say for an album, some things you got to say for different projects, and it's about breaking that down and making sure that they trust you and understand how that works, which can be tough to hear.
Yeah, that's so interesting, because I think there's a real common misconception as well, whereby sometimes you see, like you say, like an artist have this kind of astronomical trajectory, and a lot of the times what you see is a very quick rise, and it lasts for an instant, and then there's nothing, and it's almost like putting all of your money on one bet, and not leaving yourself savings in order to have something in case it doesn't go exactly to plan, or if it sometimes it does, and you may blow up on the scene, but if you don't have anything to go forward with after the fact, it's so fickle. People can see, it's very easy to be termed a one-hit wonder as well. And I think I've been talking to people in the past sessions about this as well, about like kind of managing your expectations about how you see your career, and being present in the small successes that you make, because like you say, they're the bank of knowledge and the experience that you build up over time, that then when you get to a certain level, you've got all this experience to be able to sustain being a part of this kind of circus machine that we're all part of. And I think a lot of young people maybe see outwardly what is in the press, and like you say, expect to attain that immediately. And I don't think that that's it's not something that's it's talked about a little bit, but maybe not enough. That about, like you say, managing expectations and being open to the fact that there are going to be no's and there are going to be rejections along the way as well. And how do you manage, or how do you kind of translate that to someone if, for example, in your past experience, you have had someone who's come along and has had expectations of grandeur and has maybe had a couple of rejections and stuff like that? How do you manage a relationship like that with a client?
Yeah, well, first of all, like we talked before, it's about gaining trust. So it's about, conversing with them in a way that is like a two-way conversation, and making sure that it feels safe and that you're not speaking to people in a tone that can feel like, not like accusatory, I'm not trying to think of that, but like trying to have like an open dialogue that is really, really honest, and backing that up with a strategy and showing them how that works. And I think sometimes you have to over explain things to say it out really clearly, and often you will say things and they might not be exactly what the artist wants to hear, but again, they've hired you because this is your job and this is your expert, and PR is about experience and it's about understanding things and as they happen, and like learning as trends change and as coverage changes. And I think like the artists themselves, they're only going to get what they want from you by listening to you. If you can give them constructive criticism and they still don't want to listen, still take it on board, then you start to question, well, why have you taken a PR on?
Yeah,
that's the thing. And I think it's just about being honest with them and being sound, and you have to just really hope that they trust you.
Yeah, and I guess just and be upfront from the outset about what you are willing to provide for them, what you, in your own experience, know that you can, like some guarantees, of the work you will do, but maybe not guaranteeing the results per se, because who knows what a journalist or a magazine or an event may want to pick up in that given time, depending on what the flavor or the vibe is in the scene at that moment as well.
There are so many things that come into that, because and this affects both artists and PRs, it's not a results-based industry, so it's like overwhelmingly stressful. You can facilitate and you can put something in front of someone as much as you can. You can do everything you can, but like you cannot force someone to write about something. And also, someone might write about it, but they're not always going to write good things. You're not forcing someone to. You're paying for coverage, but you're not paying for positive
a specific type of coverage.
You're paying to have it spoken about, and like that is the journalist's prerogative at the end of the day, and that can be really difficult as well. Also, things like sometimes you just have a week or a month where releases are crazy. Like you might have a week where Adele, Taylor Swift, J Hus, who else? Passaloo. You could have these like big major artists, and they might all drop their single on the same day. You might have like 2 singles out for like new or emerging artists on that Friday, and the press are just not interested. And sometimes you will have inklings of when things are going to drop. Like you can follow pre-saves, and you can, you might have some hearsay, but sometimes it is the luck of the draw that it's really congested at press. And like this is another thing, it is about explaining that you are doing the very best you can, but you do not control the media. And laying that out and being honest, like with experience you learn. Like I've had times where I've thought something is gonna maybe get picked up more, or things are going to be like slightly different, and when that doesn't happen, or when you get excited about a piece of coverage that hasn't yet just got over the line and it backtracking to your client is like the worst thing. And it does happen because things change, but again, it's making sure that you're honest from the outset about the nature of the beast.
Yeah, and I mean, it is a beast, as both of us have experienced. I coming from trying to do this kind of record label DIY in the first couple of years, and very, very quickly realizing I had no idea what I was doing. And I was more drowning than swimming for sure. And even just it can be extenuating circumstances that have nothing to do with music as well. Like we put a release out a couple of years ago, and lo and behold, we released it the week of the general election, and we planned it way before the general election was announced, and then by that point it was locked in, and we'd started promoting it. So we'd already said the release date, and a lot of the times as well, like once you're committed to something like that, almost, if like you say, by backtracking or regressing, it can cheapen the product and the value of what it is that you're trying to promote. And yeah, lo and behold, the record came out, and then the current government got voted in, and it was no one was really in the mood to do very much buying of records at that point in time. And
what's going on in the world also, like, you know, bigger things are going to get covered, and I think I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but it is really important to sometimes remember that it's just PR. It's not saving the world. It's something that's going out, and when you put something out, it's out there forever unless you really pull it off and you go through all the, you know, the process of getting things removed and stuff. Like once you put something out, it's out there, and that's how it is. Things happen in the world that you can't control, especially now. Like the news is mental, and coverage is, again, we'll talk about this, but like coverage is changing so much, and as more outlets are covering music in a different way as well. Like we are talking about like how politics and dance music are intertwined. We're talking about different artists and what their stories mean to them a lot more in the industry. And I think, like, you know, for example, press coverage around Black Lives Matter protests, like, you know, the media landscape changed there, and it had to, because the focus was on talking about dance music and talking about its origins and covering, you know, artists from minorities as they should. And like, it's sad that it took something like that to have
ignite that
stronger impact. And you know, I'm sure there's artists out there that may be upset that June was a quiet time for releases, but there are bigger things at stake sometimes.
Exactly. And like you say, I think the point you made about, you know, we're not trying to save the world here, and it's a really good lesson for anyone across the board in that regard, is to exercise checking your ego a little bit in all ways when it comes to even in, like, what we'll talk about later with mental health and whatnot. But one thing that you just mentioned that I really want to kind of get into, because we are talking about the changes of media and how things have, I mean, even in the last couple of years, even in the last year, 6 months, the outlook has changed massively. And yeah, so these days, PR itself is a completely different animal to what it was a few years ago. And what are some differences between your experience of your, like, historic music PR and the type of PR that you're doing today?
Yeah, I mean, like, well, the biggest, like, most obvious change is obviously print media diminishing, like early 2000s, even up to like 2015, 2017, and even more recently, you know, like broadsheet supplements are getting continually pulled, and print magazines have stopped, and that can be like due to a lot of issues, but it really was like the birth of digital and social and the growth of that accelerated it. We're also seen, like, during lockdown, with events not happening, some magazines haven't been able to do their ad sales. You know, there's all these different reasons for income not coming in and for changes, and as platforms overtake different, like, traditional media, that is going to excel more and more. And I think you also, with that, have the issue that as your print media stops, or, you know, starts to diminish and go online, then you lose a lot more journalists. You start to lose different, like, types of coverage. You start to lose different genres and different, like, you basically just lose a massive amount of people that were able to cover music in a very specific way.
that translated to, I guess, in some regards, translated to a digestible way for the public to be able to, because I mean, as like you say, with the digital age, things are coming out more and more rapidly. There's so much music out there, and more power to it. Like, I love it, but it's a lot to get through, and sometimes you need those kind of waypoint people who, like, not, and again, this is again, it can be very positive and be very, very negative in its manner. We talked about gatekeeping earlier, but having a trusted person that you trust, and you're like, oh, I'm, they kind of align with my music taste, so I'm going to check out what they're writing about. And that's changing quite a lot now as well, because there's a lot of self-releasing, which again, I'm a firm believer in. I think it's great, but it does cause a almost, I mean, as we're moving towards this kind of fast fashion way of life as a whole, in all aspects of life, I can get a bag of crisps delivered on Deliveroo, and it's like, all these kinds of things are just totally mind-boggling. But and with Spotify and like the access to anything at any time makes it very difficult to kind of shine a light on something, and give it the longevity that maybe it might need. Because, like you say, different artists have different needs, and their creative output may need a longer time to percolate in the scene. But that is becoming less and less apparent, as people now are announcing 2 weeks before, sometimes announcing on the day that they're releasing an album. And it makes it very difficult, I think, for anyone. Like, that can work if you're established per se and you have an audience. If you don't, it can get lost within the melee of things being released all at once. And I'm just curious how you navigate that as a PR now, with like, and how do you see it changing, or what do you see it might happen in the future?
Well, yeah, I mean, just going back again, as these different, like, all these different ways of discovering music, like, young people are discovering music like totally elsewhere. Like, I would probably ask my little brother, who is 21, does he know anything about music journalism? Does he read music news? No, of course he doesn't read music news. And we've seen that changing now. Like, in like 2017, 2015, you could put a single out and you'd have maybe 30, 40 links of news. That's because we had loads of blogs, we had loads of different sites, we had different premieres, for example. Premieres are definitely, like, exclusives don't happen anymore. And I would say now, especially with releases at the minute, like, news, people don't read music news anymore. It doesn't happen. And also, like, again, because these publications have changed, they've lost staff, or they've changed their format, they don't always have the teams to cover that as well. So one thing that we've seen a lot of is now, rather than writing news on a new release, a lot of like tastemaker sites like Crack, Dummy, Face, ID, broadsheets of The Guardian, Times, they will have weekly playlists. And now, for me anyway, that is your news. If you get added to that playlist, that's your news, that's your shout out, that's your feature. And it's just changed so much. And like, you have TikTok now, and you don't know what is gonna bring someone to explode. Like, I was reading the other day that Akon has just gone platinum again with his Convicted album, and that was released like years and years ago. But you see, it's these, like, the original fans of that, like young people finding this music now and not having known what it was, and it's just a total minefield of
having no context of its original release, so to speak, because that news isn't really around anymore. And so if like you say, it goes across a viral TikTok, and all of a sudden everyone's jamming to Akon, like we have done famously in the past.
Exactly.
No, this is it's so interesting. I mean, that's so, like, maybe we can move on, because I'm aware of the time. And we can talk a little bit about navigating the kind of minefield of music, building relationships, and managing a career. So we've obviously discussed PR and what that's about, and the kind of massive spider's web of what PR covers, and the pros and cons of it in the wider scene. As you mentioned earlier, you've just recently gone freelance with the aim of working just for yourself, and creating your own PR agency, essentially. And I would really love to get into how you've managed that. So, firstly, what was the reason for wanting to start out on your own and start your own PR business, if you don't mind me asking?
So yeah, going like back to the very start to what I said,
Mm.
I'd sort of given like an insight to what I'd done at the start, which was moving around different internships and assistants and then getting my first PR role. After that, I ended up working for a big advertising like event in Cannes, and then as a producer. Then I ended up working for a label, and then ended up back in music PR. And I always have found myself trying and doing different things, but always coming back to PR. And I, after the pandemic, and you know, I think it was just food for thought for everyone about like how you want to work, and you know what changes in your life do you want to make better, and like what ways your working setup work for you. And I'd left London and moved home, and I just felt like I wanted a little bit more control and autonomy over how I work, and really solidify myself as a PR in my own right. After doing it for so many years. And also having more autonomy over like the creative side of the job, whether that's like something as simple as like running the agency socials in a way that I feel is true to myself, and sharing coverage, through to engaging with more specialist press. So whether that is like beginning to work more with community radio, working more with podcasts, and working with more like different kind of groups as well. Like I've been working with a charity group on some work, and I, you know, with an agency, sometimes it's not as easy to work with different clients that might not have the budget, or that might not be working in alignment with something else that you're doing. And I was always really lucky. Like everywhere I've worked has been really great and really open to doing stuff, especially with charities. And that's something that's close to my heart. And I've never felt put or anything, but I just thought, if you've done this as I've always been a freelancer. There's a thing in the music industry, especially, where companies are set up to bring staff in as freelancers, with the expectation of not working for anyone else, clocking on and off on set hours, but you also don't have any employee benefits. You've got no sick pay, you have no annual leave, you've got no pension, no like nothing, no employee schemes, no travel expenses. If you're remote, you don't have an office access. Definitely no yoga classes or reduced travel or anything. And
Be gentle.
This is like generally across, you know, the entire industry. This isn't just like, this isn't specifically examples that have been unique to me at all. Like I've always been treated really well, but it's just more in terms of being a freelancer. If you're gonna work in a way where you don't have that kind of security, then you know you have to look at the other things in your life and what's the benefit to doing that, as opposed to having a salaried job. And I think as I've moved home and, you know, working on my mental health and things like that, I felt like I still want my flexibility. And I'm going to try to see how it works for myself. And as I've been technically a freelancer, I thought, well, it can't be that different because I've been doing this anyway. I've been doing the work. I just wanted a way to fulfill my needs a bit more and keep me motivated. And I realized that the way to do that was to like start maybe doing a bit of traveling again, working remotely a bit more, and embracing opportunities that I always that I often see a lot of other music industry professionals doing, whether that's like, whether they're working from somewhere abroad or whether they've got their hands in different projects. And I just thought, I can't look at other people and want what they have and complain about it by not doing something different. So I just thought I'd do it.
Well, more power to you, Jen. And honestly, I think as well, like, it boils down to feeling nourished in what you're doing, and secure obviously is extremely important. And like you say, there is, as freelance, that security is hard fought for. But also as well, I mean, in some respects, you know, like yes, freelance has connotations of picking and choosing what you want to do, but you're also very much limited in a lot of ways, and it can limit your own creative side, which comes out. And this what all these sessions are about, and what we're trying to like get across is that there are so many avenues of work within music and art that are creative but not traditionally creative per se. We're not painting, or we're not creating music ourselves, but we're being creative on so many other facets within that realm. And I was wondering if you have any kind of do's and don'ts, or if there's any experiences that you've had since kind of taking the step on your own that you could talk about. Any pros and cons, essentially.
Well,
we've already mentioned lots of pros, obviously, but if there's any difficulties as well, just for anyone, because it's a big step, and I think having a bank of experience and contacts has obviously very much enabled and helped you to take that step. But for someone starting out, it could be a very daunting experience to think stepping out on their own per se.
Yeah. Well, I would first say, like, look after your finances, and maybe don't do it before you have to file a tax return, because that can quickly turn your situation to one that's like very, very stable to one that's quite stressful, especially if you get hit with a big bill. I'm lucky. I thought I was going to get a big bill, but I got a rebate for the first time in my life, so that's good. Yeah.
Yes.
But the point is, it's very easy to make a snap decision and think you have it all under control, but especially again, freelance, like, things can change very easily. Or if you lose a project or something that you thought you had in the bank, in the bag, also in the bank, if that doesn't come through, it can really change how that month and possibly the whole year is going to look for you. I would say be positive about it, and be like mindful about how you communicate what you're doing and what your plan is, and have a backup plan as well. Like, I had 3 different backup plans in case things didn't, start off, like, in case I didn't hit the ground running. And I have comfort in the fact that I still have them, and I know that if something doesn't quite work out, then I've got, like, some other options.
Alternatives, yeah.
Yeah, and also just having a really good support network, having positive relationship with clients, and keeping in touch with them as well. Not necessarily to like solicit business. Like, I didn't do any pulling or soliciting, but once it was known that I was leaving, then I was able to like reply to them or respond to anyone who come to me
or approaches you. Yeah, exactly. And I think also we had Ira Osborne, a young business owner, on last week, and he was talking about like backing yourself, and this kind of follows that up in and having a support network around you, but backing yourself in a way that is you're doing the work, and you're creating organic connections with people through shared passion. And when they see an opportunity that may really suit you, they will reach out to you, rather than potentially just rely on the same old thing that they've been doing, because you've created a relationship, a friendship with them. They understand who you are, what you stand for, and that opportunity might just, it may be a release, and they think, right, Jen's the perfect person. She's done X, Y, and Z with us in the past through other things or whatever, and then that's like, people will reach out to you as well. And that's so important, I think, because it's very easy to see through very quickly people who are after something for themselves, and they're not in it for, shall we say, the right reasons, in that regard, which is building the community and bringing people up around you as you rise in whatever field it is.
Yeah, I mean, I think my actual favorite thing about working in PR is meeting people. And I went through years of struggling, kind of being quite lonely in London. And then when I started working in PR, I met my people, and I connected with people who are like my best friends. And I'm really lucky because some of them are in the industry, some of them are journalists. And that doesn't mean I have guaranteed coverage at all, but it means I have people who understand the struggle and the stresses of it. And I do think that if you're in the industry, you will have good connections, and you have to have them, because if you don't, you will find it so hard. And one of my favorite things, again, about the job is actually connecting people. So if I know someone's looking for work, like, I feel like I'm quite a good sort of connector, I guess. I was trying to think of another word, but yeah, I
Bridge.
love like putting people together, like a bit of a glue. And I
Yeah.
kind of feel like I always, not always, but I often am able to think, you know, oh, this person needs a photographer, or this person is looking for this work, or even if I see some freelance work, I'll send it to my friends and be like, does anyone need this? And I think that's all part of being a positive force and looking out for each other in a world of work that can be really
Very
like volatile, and it can change a lot. In terms of building relationships, I think a really good example is that when I went out on my own this year, I got back in touch with my old colleague at one of my first jobs, and we worked on all those festivals I was talking about together. She started doing a lot more freelance too, to the point where she actually needed someone to come on board with her, and we always worked to really get well together. And I've been able to take on work with her on like a part-time basis, and having that means I have security in what I'm doing, because if something's not as fruitful 1 month in my own agency, then I know I have this set amount of work and I have guaranteed, albeit small, income at the end of every month. And because we're both freelance and we both work in the industry and we know each other well, like it's a very easy relationship, and that's real. Like I'm very lucky to have that. And I think in terms of do's and don'ts, I would say if it will fit your schedule, then definitely try and get some guaranteed work in, because the benefits to your mental health will be huge.
Yeah, I think that's that kind of brings us very neatly and nicely onto our final topic, which is, well, the kind of area that we wanted to really dive into, which is talking about mental health, self-worth, job security, and managing burnout, essentially, which I think especially now, I mean, we started the session talking about how busy we are, you know, and it's the 2nd of February, and that kind of blows my mind a little bit. But yeah, I think I'd like to talk a lot about mental health. I think it's a really, really important subject. It's a subject that has recently, up until recently, not necessarily been ignored, but it hasn't been given the weight and the time at the table to be talked about as it should have been. And now in the last, I would, like few years especially, we're really opening up as a community and being honest and creating spaces where these topics can be talked about, which do amazing things for people who may feel isolated in certain areas of their creative practice and maybe feeling weighed down or burnt out, for example. So like a lot of people right now, myself included, or I've just come out of a period of burnout. They might not even know it. And from your experience, what are some signs of burnout that you've experienced or have seen in the scene?
Yeah. Just to flag before we start talking about mental health, I am not like a mental health professional. I'm mental health first aid trained. So everything I say is what works for me and what I've experienced. I can't speak for everyone else. And obviously this advice isn't a replacement for anyone who actually needs professional help. But I think in terms of sharing our experiences, it is important. And the mental health first aid training definitely helped with that, which I'll talk about later. But burnout is like, it's not necessarily actually classified as a mental health issue, but it was recognized by the World Health Organization in 2019 as an occupational phenomenon. And that was before lockdown. And lockdown has like massively affected our work-life balance and working environments. And at a time when we're already contactable all the time, and especially if you're an artist or if you're creative and you're wanting to share your work and you want to create your work, and you can't get away from this content, you can't get away from your emails, you can't get away from Instagram. The lines of work have been really blurred. Your clients follow you on Instagram, maybe you follow your artist on Instagram, and where does that relationship building become too crossed? Or, it's different for everyone, but that's like something that will definitely feed into it. So the signs of burnout is like physical and emotional exhaustion. It's when you experience long-term stress in your job, or when you've worked in a physically or emotionally draining role for a long time. So common signs are feeling tired or drained all the time, feeling helpless, trapped and defeated, feeling attached. Maybe you feel feeling detached, sorry, maybe you feel alone, having an increasingly cynical or negative outlook. As you said, self-doubt, procrastinating, taking ages to do a task which you know will take you 10 minutes, and generally feeling overwhelmed. And I think in PR, especially creative like industries, you know, it can happen really quickly to you for a number of reasons. PR is fast-paced work, and it can change instantly to all the factors that we mentioned. As I said before as well, it's not a results-based industry, and it's very hard to take maybe passes or negative feedback or no feedback. Maybe you'll email an email, you don't get the feedback. It's hard not to take that personally, especially when part of the job is really about relationship building. And you really have to be able to not think that these things are a personal attack. It's just that we're all so busy. We're so overwhelmed with music and news and content, and especially in the pandemic, like, how are you meant to do your job normally when you're dealing with a global crisis? And I think we actually have forgotten like the actual levels of trauma that is. Like, going to work every day whenever the world is literally burning around you, that alone is enough to burn you out. And I think like whenever you're juggling lots of different projects at one time, when you're managing clients who work in different ways, you know, it's very overwhelming.
I think, everything you said resonates very scarily in a lot of ways, but I think it's really important because we all experience it, and we may not realize that we are, because we have, like you say, we've got used to certain toxic traits within our work ethics and how we perform our daily tasks in whatever role it can be. And the point about, you know, like, just even going to work whilst in a pandemic is a hard enough task as it is, let alone then clubs reopening, pressure to create music, pressure to be booking artists, pressure to be putting on events, pressure to be making a name for yourself, are all really stressful things on a normal day, in a normal environment, let alone with having had 2 years of essentially it being stagnant, but yet the rate of information you're taking in still being just as much, and not being able to go out and release that through, whether it be going out to see friends or whatever anyone does to let off some steam. And I was wondering if you have any tips that have worked for you. Again, like we say, these aren't, you know, this isn't scripture, so to speak. This is just advice from our own experiences. But anything that you've done or has helped you in the past to mitigate kind of some of the worst effects of burnout?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was maybe looking at my coping habits and facing up to them. So stopping staying late all the time, as much as you think it's an escape, doesn't make you feel good. I'm down on drinking. It's really textbook stuff, but it's stuff that you hear people say or you say you should do. Actually, until you do it, you don't realize the difference it makes. Walking every day. Walking is so good for your mental health. Like, if you are, you know, physically able and you have spaces you can go to, even just 10, 15 minutes away from your desk, getting out in the morning, getting out at lunchtime, just letting off steam. Also, if you have someone to walk with, there's something about walking with someone that is different to sitting down talking. I feel like there's more space to talk. I feel like you have no distractions and conversation flows easier, and it can be really therapeutic. And with that, you're getting a regular break. You're getting away from your screen time. Things like turning off your notifications after office hours if you can. Maybe removing your email notifications for the weekend. I sometimes sporadically delete social media. And things like that. Exercising, again, if you're physically able to do, it's one of those things that it's really hard to hear someone say, oh, you need to move, you need to get up, and it's really hard to move yourself sometimes. And then when you do, you know, endorphins are real. And I think it's these simple things that remind you that your microcosm at work isn't everything. Like there's a whole world outside, and you can forget that easily.
Yeah, I think it's the points you made about, you know, like notifications and limiting kind of your interaction with the creative side of the world in which you work to your work hours is something that I think a lot of people forget to do, and maybe feel almost a sense of, oh, I'm not doing enough if I'm not constantly online and responsive, and maybe I'll miss an opportunity. But I mean, if you try and sustain something, I mean, I've been there myself, and especially learning now that it's okay to have my to have my creative working hours and be like, these are my hours in which I will work, and outside of that I'm going to find other things to do. And I used to think, oh, but what if something comes through and I miss an opportunity? But if you're exhausted and stressed and you're not at your best, and that opportunity comes along, you're not going to be able to enjoy that opportunity to its fullest anyway. And you may end up doing yourself even more damage by stretching yourself even further, and doing, and whether it be creating a piece of art or working for a client or whatever, not being able to give what you want of yourself in that moment, then it can actually do you a disservice down the line anyway. And the work opportunities may go amiss for like, and people may be like, oh, well, that didn't work out. Let's maybe we'll look with someone else next time, or something like that. And sometimes just saying no, and like learning the power of no in a lot of ways, is something that we all definitely could learn a little bit more about. And I know I'm guilty of it for sure. But then talking about the power of no, this is kind of related to work environments. So can you, sorry, I've just lost myself a little bit. I'm just making sure we're in the right place. Talking about like a positive work environment, and maybe you could talk a little bit more about that and how you manifest a positive work environment, or if you're unable to, how can you manage the potential negative sides of a not so safe and positive work environment?
Yeah.
You find yourself in one, and your opportunities don't, you like you because not everyone can just do their own thing, and may find that for whatever reasons they need to stay in that job for whatever reason.
I mean, I guess first of all, the thing you should really do is identify what you feel is toxic, and identify what particular things in the environment are stressing you out. Is, you know, are these stemming from not having your own boundaries? Is it because you are unable to say no, and you are not able to switch off, and you're taking on too much work, or you're working on the weekends and not giving yourself a break? And sometimes you can set a precedent for how you work, and then people will expect you to work in that way. That's not sustainable. And I think it's really important to and I say this for myself as well, to take a step back and say, what do I need right now, and how am I going to manage this time, and allowing yourself a break if you need it. Like, I think there's a big problem with girl boss culture and hustle culture, which I hate. I think it's, you know, you can be ambitious and you can want things and you can work hard, but you don't have to glamorize overworking, and you don't have to kill yourself working because you're told that you should, and that work is the most important thing, and you're like comparing your achievements with other people, because everyone's situation is different, and what factors are going on in your life might not be going on in someone else's. But when you see their work, then it can be very hard not to compare them. And I think managing that in the workplace is really about like having the confidence and strength to be honest with who you're working. If you're employed, then if you have HR, talk about your concerns, book in reviews, booking catch-ups, be honest if you feel you can. It's not easy, and a lot of people often feel they can't, but I think it's really important to be critical of things that aren't working for you, and look, if you can't leave, then try and find a solution. And often the more you will work with someone, the more they will reciprocate. You know, it's being grounded about it and approaching things from like a neutral and reasonable position. Again, it's not always often possible, but talking is the best thing you can do.
And holding and trying to, from my own experience, knowing my self-worth in certain experiences, especially starting out. You know, like obviously when you're starting out, you want to take as many opportunities as you can get to kind of build a platform for yourself in whatever avenue that we work in, but making sure that the work you're doing is reciprocated, and you don't become kind of known as the person who'll do things last minute. Like, I can text so and so at 11 p.m. to come and do something tomorrow morning, and they'll respond or if it's performance wise, you know, like becoming known for playing for like for nothing, or you know, like that is something that can very quickly then kind of fester within you as well, and change your own psyche of how you perceive yourself and the worth that you have for yourself going forward. So I know time is running out, but I really want to talk a little bit about the mental health training that you've done, and why it's so important. So if you'd just like to see us out, telling us a little bit about that'd be wonderful.
Yep. So I undertook the mental health first aid training in December 2020. December 2020, yeah.
It's becoming a reoccurring theme where no one's really clear what year it is anymore.
I have no idea. We're losing our years. There's amazing, like, agent, Chloe, who is a really positive force for good as well in the industry. She's like a really strong advocate for great mental health, and she sees it firsthand being an agent, and she began to set up these groups to get like a specific mental health first aid training towards people in the industry. And mental health first aid training is just so important because we all have times when we struggle with our mental health. And you know, the training, as I said, you're not a psychologist, you're not a counselor, you're not a professional, but what you do learn is listening skills, and you also get you get a big booklet full of resources for people to go to, and whether that is charities and helplines. Like, if you go to someone who's mental health first aid trained, like they don't diagnose you, they listen, and they will point you in the right direction. And that is just a really important stepping stone that I think everyone in the music industry should be equipped with, because things get really hard. And when you're out working late nights, when you're overworked, when you're in a situation where there is drugs and alcohol, things can go wrong easily. You can be super burnt out. Maybe you're anxious about traveling again after COVID. There's so many things. Maybe you have an addiction that you find hard to manage on the road. Like, there's so many things that can feed into this. And just by having someone that you can speak to that can say, okay, I think you should give this number a ring, or I think you should do that, because it's not about fixing people, but it's just about having the tools to make the industry a better place.
Yeah.
And I think when people do that, it's going to be less true.
And I get that by having that knowledge to share with someone who may be in crises or be showing signs of such, and approach you, or it may not even approach you, but being able to identify that as well, and being able to just say, oh, here are some things that from my experience, this is the knowledge that I have. When we're struggling with our mental health, it's so isolating, and it feels very much like that it's almost impossible to reach out. So knowing that there's someone there that knows what they're talking about and can point you in the right direction for, maybe, like you say, some further resources or counseling or and anything like that is so vital, because you can very easily feel adrift, and then that can spread further and further, and it can permeate into other aspects of, like it could start in your creative practice, and it can then permeate into many other aspects of your personal life and your relationships with your friends and your family and things like that. I also, I'm really interested in that training. And what we'll do is, I know, Jen, that you've got some resources to share. So what we'll do is we'll be popping them in the comments, in the description on the YouTube video when this gets uploaded.
Cool.
But we have run out of time. But Jen, thank you so much. This has been so insightful, and I've learned so much. And I know that everyone who watches this will be amazed at the level of professionalism that you bring to the game, and the force of positivity and your experience. And I hope that everyone watches it and takes something from it and helps to enlarge the positive experience that you're bringing to the table.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me and for creating such a nice open space to talk about, and your insightful questions. It's been
My pleasure. All right, Jen. Well, I'll see you on a dance floor very soon, I'm sure.
All right, I'll see you soon.
All right, much love. Bye now.
Bye.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much once again for tuning in to another session of Creating Work and Working Creatively. We will be back again this time next week with Duncan McBean, who is a producer, record label owner, event promoter. He lives rurally in the northeast of Scotland, in the same town that I grew up in. So we're going to be talking about the pros and cons, the difficulties, and just generally what it's like to be a creative in a rural area. But for now, thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll be back next week.